Welcome, everyone. It is such a delight to join all of you to discuss this very important topic, women and giving. I am so delighted to be joined by my longtime colleague, Rebecca Moffat. And today, Rebecca and I are going to touch on very different but related topics: how women are positioning themselves as leaders, becoming more visible in the philanthropic sector through their work and their impact. And with so much positive traction and momentum, how we can keep this going and assist and encourage women as they strive to be more impactful and more strategic in their giving. So Rebecca, turning it right over to you.
Una, it is truly an honor to be sharing this conversation with you today. You have been a leader in the sector that I've looked up to for my entire 16-year career here at Vanguard Charitable. Your research has been and continues to be foundational for making philanthropic decisions. So thank you so much. Do you think that you can kick off today's conversation by sharing some of the research and trends related to women and giving, especially considering the impact that COVID has had?
Absolutely. And Rebecca, let me just add that it has also been truly a pleasure to work alongside you and learn from you as well. So let me just start with the big picture and some good news here. Throughout the past 2.5, now almost 3 years, our team has been monitoring how philanthropy has responded and is changing in response to a global pandemic and economic crisis, and also a racial and social justice movement. And what we've seen in this period is truly an expansion in generosity as individual donors, private foundations, and corporations have stepped up in their giving. And we've also seen a rapid advancement in new tools and new vehicles, impact investing, collective impact models, collective giving, and pooled funds. So just to give you some numbers, giving reached $471 billion. That's an all-time record. That's our latest number from Giving USA 2021. This represents an increase of 5.1%. So certainly some good news to celebrate. And now let's turn to women. We've all heard the news about how women across the globe have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. But we've also seen women step up in their generosity, not just in their charitable giving, which we all know is important, but also through their time, their talent, their testimony, their voices, using their voices to speak out in favor of the issues that matter to them, and also through their ties, connecting their friends, their colleagues, and their communities to the causes that matter to them. One of those new areas in giving that we've been tracking is giving to racial and social justice, where we've seen more Americans giving to address inequality more broadly. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Rebecca, keeping in mind that we now have the 5 T's and expansion and generosity, not just giving money, but also many more ways that donors are contributing to responding to these multiple crises.
And I think it's so important for women to understand that, right? That the definition of philanthropy has absolutely expanded and we can make an impact in so many ways. Just to dive in a little bit on your comment about talent, I'm sure it's likely not a shock to anyone here that the majority of workers in the social sector are women. And specifically, it's estimated that nonprofit organizations, 61% of CEOs are women and 68% of staff are also women. And there's also a subset of women working in the private sector that lend their talent every single day, whether that's legal advice, business strategy, or even publicity through pro bono projects. It's such an incredible way of having an impact in a non-traditional way. I'll just say we're really proud of that trend, especially on the talent side of women dedicating their careers or leveraging their skills. Vanguard Charitable is a majority female-led organization, and that we're just really excited about. I think I'd love for us to talk a little bit, Una, maybe about the commitment that's required in order for us to sustain this type of impact. What do you think? Should we switch to that?
Absolutely. One other area that we've been tracking are the motivations, why people give. And as you can imagine, women have very specific reasons for giving to the causes that matter to them. And across the period of 2.5 years, we've also seen an inflection point with many more donors. Of course, their values matter to them, but we're also seeing issue-based donors emerge. And when we say issue-based donors, rather than just supporting a nonprofit year over year, some donors are looking broadly at causes like climate change, like gender inequality, and many other areas of giving. And they're seeking to find organizations that align with those issues. That is also very exciting because I think this is where donors can start to move the needle on an issue as they identify a cause that matters to them and then find organizations that they can partner with to actually make an impact. So this idea of issue-based donors and donors who are seeking to make a difference and move the needle on some of these newer areas, I think is encouraging and something we could continue to monitor.
Absolutely, Una. And I think finding those causes, a lot of times it is the passion underneath, right, that really drives us forward into committing ourselves to those causes. And, I know that for myself, even, I often will get sometimes caught up a bit in the passion behind the cause that I have. For me, it's really around youth causes. I have a 7-year-old who has an incredible environmental passion, which is fun to see. But I do think it's important for us to take a bit of a step back and say, how might we execute on that passion as well? What is really the importance of being strategic in how we're supporting those causes? And can we really start with some smaller acts? There's one area that I always love to provide some guidance around, and that is in the area of budgeting, this really small act around budgeting. I encourage everyone at the beginning of every year to set aside a budget and really stick to it for charitable giving. You think about that alongside all of your other financial planning, whether that's for college and for housing or retirement. We recently did a little bit of a study, and we found that only 44% of Americans who donated to charity in the past 12 months included monetary charitable donations in their annual budgets. But of those who did, gave nearly 7 times more dollars than those who don't budget at all. And then even more specifically, we see an opportunity for women to increase their giving through budgeting, as our research showed that only 30% of women build an annual charitable budget. It's just such an easy first step in order to keep the momentum going. And it's a commitment that you can make that can help to amplify your impact. It's clear that there's power in budgeting, but I do want to be clear that doesn't mean that I'm suggesting that we all set aside $1 million for budgeting. I think we need to be able to look at our own personal situations and set aside what is right for us. But I will say, and Una, I have to imagine that you get this question also. I'm often asked, I understand that I need to look at my own personal situation, but how much should I set aside for giving to charity in a year? And do you have any thoughts or resources on how someone can determine that?
Well, I'm so glad you raised that point, because in the past few years, we've seen women really lead in making some of these transformational gifts, with women like Mackenzie Scott committing $6 billion in 2020 alone to so many causes. So lots of opportunities to really step up. When we look across the board in the last 3 decades, we've seen giving remain at 2% of GDP. And this 2%, although it has ebbed and flowed in the wake of downturns, it has remained relatively constant. So the call to action today is really, what would we have to do differently to move the needle on that 2%? And perhaps this idea of budgeting could be a powerful way of changing norms around charitable giving. What we see in the data for the average American household, for those who do give, that giving is roughly around 2%, although we do see a variation with some donors giving more. And if you use that as a benchmark and you're looking for resources, we have a tool on the school website called generosityforlife.com, and a new free, easily easily accessible tool called the Give-O-Meter that allows you to benchmark your own giving across the country with people who share your similar education, income levels, and many other factors. So visit thegenerosity.com, Generosity for Life, and the Give-O-Meter is freely available if you'd like to experiment with a tool that can help you benchmark. Now, turning it back over to you, we've issued a call to action. Certainly, we can all do something to move that needle, and there's so much need in many of our communities. And as we've already noted, women are stepping up in many ways beyond their monetary resources.
Absolutely. And I think really seeking out that data to help you make those decisions is so critical. The Give-O-Meter is an incredible resource. I have used it many times, so I encourage everyone to take a look at it. And those, especially those free publicly available resources can really help you to determine how better to make an impact. At Vanguard Charitable specifically, I'm really proud of the resources that we provided donors, especially our NAVI platform, which is the nonprofit aid visualizer. This is a groundbreaking new tool, and it really puts unprecedented data at donors' fingertips via this interactive platform. It makes it really easy for individuals to pinpoint charities that are solving the problems that they care the most about. We first developed this tool, NAVI, to simplify and empower the charitable research and decision-making process of giving to those areas hardest hit by COVID. And most recently, we released an update that focuses on hunger and homelessness in the United States. So I encourage everyone to visit vanguardcharitable.org and use the NAVI tool to find organizations that you may love. Una, I know that you also have a tool that can help individuals find organizations that they care about. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Excellent. Well, thank you for bringing that up. In the past few years, we've all followed the news on how women around the globe have been disproportionately impacted by the COVID pandemic, with increased demands on their time as far as childcare is concerned, and also with economic shocks affecting more women in the workforce. With this as a background, we at the Lilly Family School have been working on a new resource called the Women's and Girls Giving Index, which looks at the charitable landscape here in the United States and finds that of the essentially 1.3 million nonprofits in the US, there are about 470,000 organizations, 47,000 charitable organizations, which represent $8.2 billion in philanthropic support based on the latest year that we have the data. This represents 1.9% of overall charitable giving. So what we found is, despite all the funding that's available in philanthropy, a tiny fraction is going to organizations that are focused on improving conditions for women and girls. We know that investing in women and girls not only transforms communities, but leads to more sustainable paths for communities around the world. And so, to put this in context, we've made this tool available so that people can go into that database and find organizations that are focused on gender equity, understanding that if we really want to improve conditions in all of our communities, the way to start is by investing in women and girls organizations. So another call to action, I'd encourage all of you to take advantage of this new tool to learn more about women's and girls focused organizations. There are many of them that exist, and also to find ways to support organizations that are moving the needle on gender equity, not just in the United States, but around the world. So with that, I'd like to turn it back to Rebecca in terms of compared with everything else that we know, what's next for giving by women and, of course, to women's and girls' causes?
Well, and I love that, Una, and I think to summarize the conversation, the next and really most important big step that women can now take with all of this information in mind is to really become a role model for the next generation and encourage others to give, so that we can sustain this focus, sustain this impact, and sustain this momentum moving forward. And hopefully all of the resources that we provided today can help everyone to do that. Una, so thrilled to have been here with you today.
Thank you so much for this inspiring conversation. Let's continue this momentum.
Absolutely.